You know, it takes guts to have an ensemble cast. Writing a three-dimensional main character with wants, fears, personality, and a backstory is already a tough nut to crack, even more so when you have one or two deuterogonists by your side. But having to do that with a whole slew of characters all at the same time? That's something else, especially when said slew gets into the double digits. In that sense, it would make sense that writers would want to remove one or two of them to give others some time to shine. Or 3. Or 4. Okay, maybe just remove 75% of the cast and, yeah, that's better. However, doing this presents us with a completely new problem. If members of a cast get booted off one by one, those characters will get less screen time and thus will not be as developed as the surviving members of the cast. So, how do you manage to give time to everyone when there's a chance some of them will disappear from the show entirely? Well, there are multiple ways to do this. Squid Game does this by keeping the ensemble cast relatively small and killing them off at a lower frequency, but to keep the sense of a dwindling cast, it also uses visuals and framing to show the immense size and scale of the deaths, and even takes a look at some of the other contestants to show that this affects far more than just our main cast. Total Drama, on the other hand, fixes this issue in another way by having the cast return for multiple seasons. So even if characters like Noah, Beth, and Cody leave early in the first season, they still get chances to shine in later ones. Even Danganronpa, a game that I've talked about many times, tries to remedy this issue with free time events, allowing you to get a chance to know your favorite characters personally before they hit the chopping block, all while giving you a sense of strategy, making the player want to hang out with the characters they think they will die next, as, if they do, they'll never be able to interact with them again. However, I want to talk about one specific game in question, and how it not only manages this conflict, but also manages it extremely effectively, and since you already read the title of this video, you know exactly what game I'm talking about. So, it's been a while since I talked about this game, huh? If you don't know what I'm talking about, Your Turn to Die is an indie RPG Maker game created by a person named Nakadai. And if you watched any of my videos about this game before, you would know that I find this game to be absolutely phenomenal. I've talked about how it utilizes gameplay into manipulating the player into feeling guilt and grief over the loss of the cast members, how the characters each have depths and motivations that make them feel like real people, and how Sarah Chitoyan is one of the best protagonists I've ever seen, especially as the protagonist to a video game. However, there's one thing that I've yet to discuss, and that's something that I've only really thought about recently. As anyone who's played the game knows, Your Turn to Die contains a dwindling ensemble cast like the ones I've talked about earlier, yet each of the 12 characters we've seen throughout the course of the game each have an equal shot in the spotlight despite that. Why? How? Well, in this video, I think I found a couple of reasons as to how the game is able to pull off such a feat, starting with the first way Your Turn to Die manages to keep all its cast members equally memorable is one I've seen many people talk about, but regardless, I feel like it's important to talk about here. One problem people have raised in Danganronpa specifically is that whenever an important character dies that isn't some other guy's best friend, the cast only really cares about them for a short while before the next chapter rolls around, and everyone forgets about them, like they never existed in the first place. Doing so means that, with few exceptions, characters only really get a chance to shine when they are alive or when they are in the trial they were killed in. Plus, it's just not realistic for people to just move on from death like that, at least for the first couple of times it happens. Your Turn to Die, on the other hand, makes sure to bring up its deceased members constantly, so while they may not be around anymore, their presence never really leaves. Not only that, but each member does this in a completely unique way, which further increases their memorability and avoids redundancy in the process. First, we have Mishima, who we remember by witnessing Nao's grief firsthand. Her grief not only shows how much Mishima meant to her as a person, but we also get to see her grief in her actions, such as how she ran away with Mishima's head in Chapter 1, and how she becomes unhealthily attached to the Mishima AI during Chapter 2. These actions of Nao show how grief can truly affect one's psyche, and it also foreshadows further grief that is seen later on in the game. Speaking of AI Mishima, that's another way his character stays relevant to the story while introducing the concept of AI dolls, a recurring concept in Your Turn to Die in which one's memory is stored in the AI of people who look exactly like you, essentially a near-perfect replica of you at the time. And this basically asks the characters in the audience if a deceased loved one were to be perfectly replicated, would you want that replication in your life? We see this sort of question pop up with many other characters in different ways, including our next deceased character, Joe. Ah yes, Joe Mama, He's probably the biggest example of having a massive presence even after his death, being about as important as Sarah being about as important as Sarah herself, which says a lot considering that he's the second character in the entire cast to, expire. Like with Mishima, Joe's death heavily impacts one character in particular, but what makes him stand out so much is that this time, all this grief is happening to you. Not just Sarah, but you as well. We've seen exactly how grief can absolutely destroy someone like now, but in Chapter 2, you can finally see exactly why she did the things she did as you experience what she felt firsthand. The guilt, trauma, and grief Sarah faces is sprinkled into practically every moment of Chapter 2 as she has to face off gut-wrenching hallucinations of the friend she just lost, even having an in-game feature where you cannot be reminded of Joe too much or else you lose the game as Sarah is too traumatized to function. This, coupled with the guilt expressed by the player themselves with how the gameplay is utilized in Joe's demise, really emphasizes how severe of an impact Joe has for the entire game, and it's probably one of Your Turn to Die's darkest elements. On a lighter note, our next victim, Kai, has a much more uplifting presence after his death in two ways. Like with Mishima and Joe before him, his death has a major impact on one of the survivor characters, this time being Kyutaro. But unlike the previous examples, Kai's act of resistance by dying in his own hands inspires Kyutaro to escape this entrapment and stand up to the floor masters once and for all. The second not-so-glum aspect of Kai's after-death presence, and this is something that makes Kai particularly stand out, is that during his mysterious relation to Asunaru and Sarah's family, we get to see glimpses of that even after his death, such as with Kai's laptop and a flashback scene with him and Mr. Chijojin, both of which were in Chapter 2. Not only does this expand on Kai's character, these scenes also expand on the larger mystery of Asunaru and Sarah's father as a whole. I could go on and on with these examples, but the fact that each of these characters gets their own unique level of recognition after their passing really emphasizes the fact that they are still a vital piece of this truly iconic cast. While the deaths that occur in Chapter 2 don't nearly get the same level of presence as the earlier ones, they still do get something to remember them for, and even the characters who are able to live in other routes get to have the same after-death presence, just in different ways, which brings me on to my next point. When I first talked about how the characters in Your Turn to Die are able to stay memorable even after their death, this was probably the first thing that came to your head. One of Your Turn to Die's most prominent features is its branched storytelling, more specifically, how some characters die in some routes while living in other ones, their deaths being occupied by different characters this time around. When it comes to having each of your ensemble cast remain memorable despite its dwindling numbers, this approach seems like the best of both worlds, allowing all of your characters to have the equal chance in the spotlight while simultaneously keeping the cast number at an appropriate size. In fact, this is exactly how the Zero Escape series handles the size of its ensemble cast, allowing for different routes to focus on different characters. However, when it comes to Your Turn to Die, I don't think it's that simple. There is another element to these timelines that expands on all the characters affected by the timeline change, both living and dead, that allows us to see a deeper look at their character. While the characters I discussed earlier focused on their individual presence in different ways, these deaths focus on something more subtle, something that might only be noticed after a second playthrough. When one of the characters dies in these branching paths, the game focuses on contrasting the many differences between these timelines, and what emotions are felt during them. And just like with the previous deaths, the way each branch handles this contrast differs, but both do share a common grid of difference in tone. Let's start with the first branching path, that being the death of either Reiko Yabasame or her brother Alice Yabasame. In the final attraction of Chapter 2, our cast of characters has to sacrifice one of their members in order to save the lives of Gin and Kyutaro. Once Reiko turns out to just be a doll duplicate, you're given the choice to make her the sacrifice by pushing her to her death. Ironically, if you do sacrifice her, the real Reiko lives while Alice meets his untimely demise, vice versa if you decide to spare the doll. Not only does this change in who dies heavily affect the tone of how the other reacts to their death, but what's really interesting about this is that, like with Now, this whole debacle reflects something that happens to Sarah. As we know, Joe's death has taken a serious toll on the girl, causing hallucinations and potentially a game over if things get particularly bad. Luckily, one of the floor masters, T.S. Fallen, offers a potential solution. With your permission, she can be able to make Sarah forget about most of her hallucinations, which actually depletes your hallucination level in-game. However, there's a catch. If you utilize this mechanism one too many times, your brain will, and I quote, turn to mush. While you as the player decide whether to erase these memories or not, Reiko and Alice are faced with this very choice as well, and what they do depends on the route you take. If Reiko lives, she does some soul searching after her death, and when given the opportunity to erase her painful memories, she refuses because she does not want to forget her brother, even if these memories sadden her. Throughout this route, you can see that Reiko has opened up and emotionally matured, and this can be seen with the change in sprite, showing her look at you rather than to the side. This growth is probably due to the fact that she's trying to make up for all the time she spent avoiding her brother after his murder charges, making sure not to make the same mistake again with anyone else she gets close to. Either way, it makes Reiko's route rather uplifting and hopeful, which just so happens to be the exact opposite of Alice's route. After his sister dies, Alice completely breaks. He becomes bitter and pessimistic, almost gives up on life, and the only thing keeping him from moving forward is cold, hard revenge, even after attempting murder on Gashu. You can especially see his hopelessness through the change in sprite at this moment. The disheveled hair, the droopy, tired eyes, the fact that he barely opens his mouth unless he's furious. All of it perfectly captures how emotionally drained he is. At a certain point in the game, he becomes so drained in fact, that he seeks out Safalin to erase all the painful memories he has with Reiko. And he's back to normal. I think. While Reiko went on an arc to improve herself, Alice went through a downward spiral that eventually resulted in the very decision Reiko refused to make. Something similar can be seen with the second branch, in which Sora Kano would die at the end of the second main game. Like with Reiko, Kana's route is the more uplifting one, while So's route is more pessimistic, similar to Alice. But what separates this branch from the first one is that its change in tone isn't limited to So and Kana, it affects the whole game. If you take Kana's route in Chapter 2, Sarah happily reunites with an AI Joe created by So right after he died. But in So's route, that very same AI traumatizes Sarah to the point where her mind forces her to forget about Joe entirely. These types of external changes are especially prevalent in 3.1b, having the remaining Yabasame sibling only die in the So route, having Midori confirm that Kana and So are related in Kana's route, and even having different people show up in the roulette game, such as Ranmaru and Mai. What I really like about this difference in route is that they not only flesh out these characters on their own, but looking at these scenes side by side really emphasizes how much of these characters function on their own on a deeper level by showing exactly what they would do in the same situation. Like with the gameplay, Nangadai goes above and beyond what is traditionally expected in a visual novel like it, and it's one of the many reasons why I enjoy this game so much. That said, there is one more part of Yurta to Die that makes all of its characters so memorable. And if you're familiar with the series, I think you know what it is. As a way to give fans content during the hiatus, Nangadai created Your Time to Shine, a resource management spin-off in which our cast of characters is stranded on a deserted island. The start of the game allows you to select a protagonist out of the cast, but so far, you can only choose between Mishima and Guy. Like with multiple routes, having a spin-off or piece of media that brings back eliminated or dead cast members is another common way to develop members who were booted off earlier. That's the route Total Drama took, and Danganronpa utilizes this multiple times with the School/Island/Salmon mode, the Ultimate Talent Development Plan in V3, and Danganronpa S on the Switch. However, like with the multiple routes, bringing people back from the dead to increase their screen time isn't the only thing that is done to increase their memorability. Your Time to Shine also expanded their characters in the process. To explain what I mean, let's go back to Danganronpa. While it is fun to see different characters interact with one another, if you actually think about it, we don't actually learn anything new about the characters, at least in the Ultimate Talent Development Plan. Everything we experience of them can be easily found in either the free time events or the School/Island/Salmon mode. While Danganronpa improves on this by exploring at least a couple characters more, this is very much a problem with Ultimate Talent Development Plan. Your Turn to Die, on the other hand, uses its lower stakes to explore more personal sides of the cast that couldn't be touched on in the main game due to the dire situation they're in. Mishima's smoking addiction and delinquent past, Connor's relation to her mother and sister, So's insecurities about his body, Alice's comedic obsession with stripes. These are all things that we learned specifically from Your Time to Shine that add on to these characters by seeing a brand new side to them. In fact, these funnest events, as well as the branching paths of the original story, have made me appreciate Kana as someone who was once my least favorite character a whole lot more, and now I actually like her a lot. I think this really shows how each of the three things discussed, characters being remembered after their death, branching paths, and Your Time to Shine, all help contribute to building a cast that each gets their moment in the spotlight, which is truly an amazing feat considering that, like I said many times before, this cast is a dwindling one. So there you have it. This is my long-awaited Your Turn to Die video. What are your thoughts on it? Do you like the methods discussed in this video? And if so, comment below. And as always, I'm Winsvideo. Bye!